Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 24th of January 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, bit of market volatility over the last few days, right? Markets have not been great. We're trending down to under a $2,000 ETH. And, I talked about this last week, so I'm not going to get into the price action. I'm sure you guys are probably sick of hearing about that. So let's get into some, project updates. But the first thing, which is kind of related to the price action, but I put out this tweet today where I said, Ethereum's resiliency during extreme market-wide volatility is probably its most underappreciated feature. And then I had to follow up this tweet by saying, since there's some confusion, I'm talking about the Ethereum network, not the price of ETH. I'm surprised there was confusion about this, but there was, because technically Ethereum refers to the network and Ether and ETH refer to the asset. So I never call the asset Ethereum, but I know some people do, so maybe that's where the confusion stemmed from. But anyway, back to the point of my tweet here. So what this means is essentially, I'm sure you guys saw over the last few days, like during these kind of like really volatile market movements where activity, like on-chain activity spikes really, really high across every chain, whether it be layer 1, layer 2, sidechain, what have you, activity goes crazy, because the market prices go crazy and there's bots and MEV stuff happening. It's just pretty active, right, during these movements. Now, I'm sure you've seen with some other chains, they slow down, right, or go offline completely. Ethereum obviously gets very expensive fee-wise because everyone's trying to get their transaction in, and all this kind of like stuff happens. But Ethereum is special because of its resiliency, because of its liveness, because of the fact that it's basically, it's not impossible to take Ethereum down with a DDoS attack, but it's extremely hard because Ethereum basically has, its gas limit, right? Where it's not allowing anyone to just send their transactions. It has a functioning fee market that works to kind of like taper demand. So, for example, right now Ethereum does about 13 transactions per second. So if you want to be one of those transactions, you need to outbid everyone else trying to be one of those transactions because Ethereum's block space is incredibly scarce. But if you have a network that allows you to send as many transactions as you want to it, something like Solana, the obvious example here, then what ends up happening is that those transactions, because they're basically free, get spammed by bots, by kind of like really, really bad MEV stuff, and because it's like cheap to spam, no one really cares. There's no cost to doing it, or at least the cost is basically negligible. Now, what this does, it basically degrades the network performance and doesn't price out users from using the chain, because obviously the fees aren't going up or anything like that. What ends up happening is that regular users just can't get their transactions in because there's just too much spam going on. Now, with Ethereum, the worst that happens is that you can't afford to pay the fee to get your transaction in, and something kind of like bad happens, such as getting liquidated on chain or something like that. But it's kind of like a debate of what's worse: degraded performance where no one can get their kind of transaction in because it's being spammed, or high fees because the network's basically reached capacity and everyone's trying to outbid each other. I personally think that the high fee thing is better, because it doesn't matter if the fee is like $500 to cover one of your positions, right? At least you can still do it. At least you can save your position. Whereas what happened with Solana is that a lot of people got liquidated because they couldn't save their position because the network wasn't allowing them to do so, no matter how much they paid. And I'm sure, these people would have paid whatever it took to save the leverage on-chain positions. That's just kind of like one example there. So, and I think this is kind of like, as I said here in my tweet, one of Ethereum's most underappreciated features is that because it trades off performance for decentralization and security, it also gets resiliency. It also gets a near, basically guaranteed 100% uptime. Technically the Ethereum network has had 100% uptime since Genesis, but there's no guarantee that it's going to have that into the future. But I think that having a, relative certainty of 99.99% uptime is what is needed for a global settlement layer. I don't think you can have something be a global settlement layer if during volatile periods, or even just during periods of high demand for the specific chain, it either goes offline or slows down to a crawl. Now, can these chains kind of like fix themselves, fix their issues? They can put on band-aids and things like that, and they can do things like what's done in the Web 2 world with quality of service and dropping transactions and DDoS protection and stuff like that. But it's all just kind of like band-aids, and this is why a lot of us in the Ethereum community have been kind of like beating the drum about the modular approach, where you keep layer 1 basically how Ethereum has layer 1, and you can do sharding as well if you want to, and then you do all the execution stuff at layer 2, because these layer 2s will also suffer from this, by the way. This is going to be true for anything that's trying to do execution in a kind of like an unbounded way. But the thing with the layer twos right now, at least with Optimism and Arbitrum, they still have a functioning fee market. And I think that it just becomes much worse on these non-fee market chains where they don't even have a mempool and they're basically just saying, you know, anyone can do anything they want and we'll service it. I mean, that's just not going to happen. I remember a few months ago I was saying to you guys that I don't believe you can scale to the world at layer one because the load the amount of load that comes through, especially from spam, is just too great. And you know, we've seen proof of this play out time and time again. So, and it's just funny how people kept calling that FUD. And it's like, oh, you're just an ETH maxi trying to kind of like spread this crap. I'm like, well, no, we're not. We're literally telling you guys what's actually going to happen. This is the trade-off. I mean, Ethereum and even Bitcoin people didn't spend the last decade learning about how to scale blockchains properly without, you know, sacrificing decentralization and security, but also optimizing for resiliency and liveness. We didn't spend the last decade learning those lessons for nothing. And it just seems like every, I guess, like bull market cycle, it just gets relearned because it's just really easy during kind of like a bull market to basically say, hey, you know, we have a super scalable chain, it's cheap fees, come and use us, blah, blah, blah. And then the money's flowing, so no one really cares. But then when the market turns sour, people start caring, people start taking notice, and people start asking questions, especially because they're losing money too, right? Because the token price is going down. So I think from that perspective, a lot of us who basically, said that these kind of like super scalable, or at least claim to be super scalable layer ones are on borrowed time, they're an inferior technology. I think we've been vindicated in saying that. So I think more and more people realize that the modular approach to blockchain scaling is the only approach that is long-term sustainable, long-term healthy, and long-term leads to the best results for everyone. And, I did say before that, at least with Ethereum, you can pay like a lot of money to get your transaction included, no matter what. But the thing is that in the future with layer 2 networks, with robust layer 2 networks, you won't even need to pay a lot of money to do it. You'll still have near certainty that you can get your transactions included no matter what. And when I say robust layer 2 networks, I mean ones without centralized sequencers. So they have a robust kind of like sequencer and validator set that, if one or two of them go offline, others can pick up the slack sort of thing. And then, the layer 2s have a robust kind of like mechanism where they can actually post their transaction data and call data and all that sort of stuff to a layer 1 without any hiccups there. So that's going to take a little bit to get there. Layer 2s are going to run into these issues as well. But the thing is that as I've been preaching to you guys for months now, keeping layer 1 decentralized and secure means having a functioning fee market and keeping the capacity limited so that the chain can't be DDoS, so that the chain doesn't bloat as well, which makes it much harder for people to kind of like verify the chain. And we don't sacrifice the one property that this whole movement is built on, and that is decentralization. And then by extension comes security, and by extension comes resiliency and liveness. And I've spoken about liveness at length before, so I'm not going to, double click on that one there. But I think it's very, very important to take stock and reflect on all the lessons being learned now over the last few weeks, all the narratives being challenged, and where this space is going to go from here. And I truly believe that regardless of what the markets do, I truly believe that by the time, I guess, like we kind of like have the next kind of, I guess, bull cycle where we get like a lot of new people in and things like that, we're going to have such an amazing and robust layer 2 ecosystem that people are going to be able to use that even when markets are super volatile without having degraded performance, and we'll also have cheap fees too. So best of all worlds, of course, there. Now, one last thing I wanted to say about this tweet was a great thread from Swagtimus here, who basically talked about there was kind of like that transaction dilemma that I spoke about, that Polygon wrote about a few months ago, which basically it comes down to you either choose a fee market and price out users, or you don't, and your chain goes down on your users more often than your SO. So a little bit of a joke here, but essentially, I mean, this is what I was saying, right? You have a fee market, you have a mempool. It does price out some users who can't afford to do this stuff, but at least, some set of users can actually use it. And as I said, as the layer 2 rollout keeps progressing and they become more resilient, you'll get cheap fees and you'll get to inherit Ethereum's kind of like resiliency too. Or if you don't have this, you basically get spammed and DDoS, and it's not good for anyone. Like not even no one can get their transactions in because everything's just being spammed. So I think that's just very something that to keep in mind, something to kind of like realize that has been vindicated at this point. I'm pretty happy about this, to be honest. Like it was quite annoying for the last, I don't know, 6 months or so where the L1 narrative really took off and everyone was just screaming about how their favorite L1 had solved everything and it was all good and they had no issues. And I kind of like said, I mean, they're all going to run into issues, especially as they kind of like reach their own capacities or people start using them more. And that's exactly what happened. They ran into their own issues, then they're worse issues than what Ethereum has in my mind. And maybe they solve them, maybe they don't. As I've said before, I don't think there's room for more than maybe 2 settlement layers. I only think one long term, but I think, you could have 2 potentially, but I really don't think that there's room for like 10 different execution layers at layer 1. I actually think maybe there's room for one execution layer 1, and maybe, Solana fixes their issues and becomes that. I highly doubt it, but in terms of execution layers, I expect a lot more to blossom at layer 2 than at layer 1. So the latest All Core Devs call wrapped up last Friday, and there's a lot to cover here. Tim Biker put together a great tweet thread, which you can check out in the YouTube description, but there's a lot of info about the merge and Shanghai in this thread here. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You can give it a read, but essentially a lot of updates, a lot of esoteric things, a lot of technical stuff going on across the whole Ethereum core kind of like ecosystem here. Still expecting that blog post with, I guess, post-mortem and overview of Kintsugi to go live soon. I think Danny Ryan would actually put that out, so I'm expecting that to go soon, but I haven't heard anything about the merge kind of quote-unquote being delayed. I mean, not that it has an official date or anything like that, but everything seems to be going well on that front there. So definitely check out this Twitter thread for more information on that. I'll link it in the YouTube description. So Eric Connor put out a great tweet yesterday, I think it was, where he said, hung out with a friend this week that uses Ethereum daily but solely lives on Arbitrum. Never touches L1. Scaling is happening before our eyes and fast. And it got me thinking about kind of like how I've been saying for a while that everyone's just going to be living at layer 2, right? No one's going to be touching L1 eventually. Like not even, even some of the whales are just going to be like, well, why would I pay, even though I can afford this, why would I pay for it if I can do the same thing at layer 2? Now, Arbitrum and Optimism are quickly maturing as ecosystems. I think the only top app that they're missing right now is Aave, and that's going live within weeks, I would assume. So other than that, they have pretty much everything you would want at this point. They have like Curve, they have Uniswap, they have other money markets on there, they have unique apps on there like options protocols, things like that. They have NFT ecosystems. So there's a lot going on those ecosystems right now, and you can pretty much do most of the stuff that you do on layer 1 in terms of DeFi. NFT ecosystem is still a lot less mature. The layer 1 NFT ecosystem is pretty big, but DeFi is pretty portable from layer 1 to layer 2, which is really awesome. So, I've been doing a lot more layer 2 stuff lately as well. It just feels nice not to have to pay those, really, really high fees on layer 1 and be able to do the same thing at layer 2, whether that be kind of like DEX trades or doing some stuff with money markets or yield farming or anything like that. It's really, really cool to be able to do that, and fast as well. Like, as I've said before, I think an underappreciated aspect of these L2s is, yes, okay, your transactions aren't finalized instantly, but they're confirmed instantly, which is just a much better UX than layer 1, which can take anywhere from it can take up to like 1 Ethereum block to or more than 1 Ethereum block. But if you get into the next block, it can take up to 14 seconds to get your transaction in, and you kind of like have to wait. And there's nothing telling you that the transaction's pending unless you go to Etherscan. Like if you're using MetaMask, for example, MetaMask just has like transaction pending. It doesn't have like a countdown or anything like that. You don't actually know if it's going to go into the next block. To get that information, you need to open up Etherscan. So it's just like all these clicks to go through. And then for newer users, it's just a very poor experience. So at layer 2, I think the fact that the transactions are confirmed instantly is just amazing user experience. And not even just for newer users, but for me as well. Like I love the fact that I can just keep, moving around at lightning speed between all these apps without having to worry about anything, and getting to do it on the cheap as well. And I think this is going to be most people, all new people's kind of like experience going forward, especially because, right now the tide has just kind of like been completely taken out. It's actually crazy how quiet the ecosystem has gone in just a few weeks because the price went down. But I think this is awesome because it gives us a bit more time to get these layer 2 ecosystems to be more mature, to get these kind of like on ramps going and things like that. So by the time these people come around, when the market gets hot again, they're going to onboard to L2, and we're going to have a proper kind of like big L2 season, and these things are really going to take off. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, it's cool to see that kind of like Eric's friend is just using L2 now, just using Arbitrum now instead of L1. And as I said, I'm progressively getting more and more of my stuff on L2. There are still a bunch of stuff that I do on L1 that I can't do on L2, but I'm obviously seeing more and more projects natively launch on L2 as well. So time's running out for L1, I think. Not to say that that's bearish for L1. I mean, L1 being replaced, user transactions on L1 being replaced with just like MEV, arbitrage and layer 2 proofs and stuff like that is actually really bullish for the layer 1. And as you've seen, over the last, few weeks, when the price has been going down, network demand is still up. Like the gas price is still around 100 Gwei. Yes, it's gone down in USD terms because if demand stays the same and the ETH price falls, then yes, it'll go down in USD terms. But in ETH terms and Gwei terms, it's pretty much remained the same. So that means network demand is pretty much the same, which is really awesome to see. And that means that people will just keep onboarding to layer 2 and not basically forego it and say, oh, layer 1's cheap now, I'll just wait. I'm actually glad that kind of like layer 1's still pricing people out, because we need that to get people to layer 2, because layer 1 is not a long-term sustainable thing. So yeah, that's really cool to see. And I hope you guys are getting a lot of value out of L2 these days as well. So speaking of L2, Swagtimus put together the first StarkNet roundup. So every week he's going to be summarizing all the notable events that happen within the StarkNet protocol and ecosystem, carefully curated, delivered straight to your inbox. So if you want to subscribe to this, you can go to swagtimus.substack.com and it'll give you a roundup of all things happening within the StarkNet ecosystem. This is really, really cool. I love this. I mean, it's been kind of like wild to follow along with Starkware and StarkNet's kind of progress here, and I'm finding myself missing a lot of things these days. I mean, look at this. It's crazy. Like, look at how many projects are already kind of like building or developing or doing things on here. I mean, like it's just going much faster than I would have thought it would be going. So it's really, really awesome to see. And he's got links to all this stuff in here as well, so you can go check all this out if you want to. But I highly recommend subscribing to this newsletter as well if you want to get pumped up on things. Like, what pumps me up the most about just Ethereum and the L2s and this whole ecosystem in general is reading updates like this. Like, I have a lot of newsletters that I subscribe to that kind of provide all these updates. And obviously, whenever I put together the content for the refuel and stuff, I get pretty excited about it, because it's just a really great way to, no matter what the price is doing, keep your head screwed on and basically see the bigger picture. Because when you start seeing like all this progress being made every day or every week, you kind of think to yourself, well, who cares what the price is doing in the short to medium term? Like, this stuff's real. This stuff has a lot of kind of like people building it. There's a lot of people using it, and there's more people adopting it, and all that sort of stuff. And it kind of keeps you kind of like grounded and going. And this is basically what happened during 2018 and 2019, especially 2019 when DeFi started kind of like really taking off in terms of things going live. A lot of us in the Ethereum ecosystem were so excited about it at the time that's really what got us through, I think, 2019, because that was a brutal year for ETH's price in 2019, not just against USD, but against Bitcoin as well. It just trended down pretty heavily. But what got us all through that was sticking to the long term, realizing that things were being built. And I think the same is true for any bearish period for the price, because the building never stops. I mean, the building's actually going to be much better this time around because so many teams got funded and they have funding in USD instead of ETH. Last market cycle, teams raised in ETH because of ICOs, and then they had to sell that ETH to actually get the USD. And by the time they did that, the ETH price had collapsed basically, and they were actually directly contributing to the ETH price going down more. But now a lot of teams have raised in USD. They've got large treasuries, large war chests, and if they wanted to raise again, they could, because there's all these massive kind of like funds now. So I think it's a much different environment, and that means that I think that the cycles are going to be definitely faster. As I've said, I don't think we're going to go into a 2-year bear market or anything like that. We are in a bear market, in my opinion, but we're going to have to see what happens, with the price and everything. But the best way to kind of like get through it is to basically ignore what the price is doing and just focus on the fundamentals and focus on the building. And one way to do that is definitely to subscribe to this newsletter. So I'll link it in the YouTube description for you to do so. So Uniswap announced over the weekend their multi-chain strategy. So basically, Uniswap is going to be deploying to all, I think they said, Ethereum-compatible networks, which I take to mean like Ethereum-compatible L2s and sidechains and L1. So obviously, they're on Arbitrum and Optimism right now. They're on Polygon POS chain. And I'm taking this to mean that they're going to go to EVM-compatible networks such as, Avalanche C chain. And there's the Gnosis chain now, which used to be XDAI. and I think there's like Phantom. There's a bunch of these kind of things, and it makes sense, right? Like it makes sense for anything that's on the EVM to deploy to EVM chains. And the funny thing is, it just further entrenches the EVM into the ecosystem. So many people hate the EVM because they think it's it's an inferior technology, which, to be fair, I mean, it's not the best technology in the world, but that doesn't matter. The best technology rarely wins. It's all about what accrues network effects, and the EVM is second to none in terms of accruing network effects. Not to say that other non-EVM ecosystems aren't going to take off. I'm pretty bullish on the StarkNet ecosystem, which is not EVM and not Solidity, but I think the EVM is going to be with us forever. I don't think it's going anywhere, and I think it's going to just increase in popularity. And we're going to get stuff like ZK EVM as well, so it's just going to further entrench it. But cool to see Uniswap detail their multi-chain strategy. It's only a short blog post, but I'll link it in the YouTube description for you guys to go check out. So Optimism put together a thread of everything that's been happening on their network over the last few weeks. So you can go check this out. Of course, it'll be linked in the description. But essentially, there's so much happening on Optimism these days. As I was just saying before, both the Optimism and Arbitrum ecosystems now, I wouldn't say equivalent with L1, but pretty close to it at this point. And in this thread, Optimism basically details it and points out all the apps that are on there. So you can go check this out if you're looking for stuff to do on Optimism. I know there's lots of people out there right now who are kind of like, okay, well, I've onboarded, what do I do? Well, here's a thread for you to go check out and go play around with all these apps. Go see what tickles your fancy, what you like doing, and enjoy the cheaper fees and faster transactions as well. So yeah, I'll link this in the description for you. So Polygon, just a short announcement from Polygon here, actually. They've renamed their Polygon SDK to Polygon Edge, and there's a new look here, and they're teasing that some more exciting announcements are coming soon. I think this actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, for those of you who don't know, the term SDK stands for Software Development Kit. Now, obviously, this is a developer thing, but I think branding matters, and Polygon does a really good job with branding. I mean, they obviously rebranded from Matic Protocol early last year to Polygon, and now they've rebranded a lot of the stuff that they've acquired, like Polygon Zero was Mir Protocol, Polygon Hermes was just like Hermes Protocol, and then there's it's escaping me right. Polygon Maiden, which I believe was still Maiden when it was kind of like Facebook, but they put Polygon there. And this is actually really important from a marketing and kind of business development perspective, because immediately you know what ecosystem these projects belong to, right? It belongs to Polygon. And you don't want to have like too complex terms. You want to have like a brand that people remember. So something like Polygon Zero, I think, is a really cool name, and Polygon Maiden, and Polygon Hermes, and then Polygon Edge. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too much into it, but I don't think I am. Branding is very powerful, and as I said, it's a very powerful marketing tool as well here. And they've also got obviously Polygon Nightfall and a bunch of other things like Polygon Avail and stuff like that. But yeah, anything that makes it easier for users to kind of like, or just people in general to, whenever they think of a Polygon product, to know the name off the top of their head without kind of getting confused, makes a lot of sense there. But, I think Polygon's going to have a big year in 2022 in general. I mean, you guys know I'm an advisor of the Polygon. I don't have to disclose that again. But I think in 2021, they kickstarted the, I guess, like liquidity mining play on a layer one, right? Like, not to say that Polygon POS chain is a layer one, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like the native token incentives from these things, just like how layer twos are going to do them, just like how these alt L1s have done them, they really kickstarted that, and they kind of like showed the playbook and showed how it's done. And they've continued that with they've continued that kind of momentum with their acquisitions of all these roll-up teams and stuff like that. And I think 2022 is going to be a big year where they actually release a lot of these kind of like roll-up stuff that they've been working on, and users can actually play around with it and get use out of it. And I think there's a big upgrade for the POS chain coming soon as well. I believe they're working on V3 of the POS chain, so that should fix a lot of the issues that are happening there. And as you guys know, the POS chain is meant to be kind of like a stepping stone before we get to these roll-ups and things. But I think that the ecosystem they have there right now is going to persist for a while. It's actually a really cool place for experimentation to happen because the fees are relatively cheap. I know they spike sometimes, and this goes back to what I was saying at the kind of like start of the refuel, where I was basically of this episode, where I was basically saying, you either have a fee market, which kind of like once the block space fills up and it gets saturated, the fees go up, or you don't, and the chain kind of like gets spammed. But the chain can still get spammed with the fee market, mind you, because it depends how much capacity you have and stuff like that, and it depends if the nodes can keep up with it. But that's a discussion for another day. But yeah, I think Polygon's going to have a big 2022 with their roll-up stuff that they're working on, a bunch of other things they're working on, obviously like Polygon Avail, which is the data availability blockchain, which is a big narrative that's heating up lately. And I think that they're going to to be doing some really cool things and really exciting things on the business development front as well. So definitely keep an eye out for all of that. So finally, Dune Analytics announced over the weekend that they have shipped sign-in with Ethereum. So you can now connect your wallet to your account on Dune by going to Settings Wallets, show your address on your profile, Settings Profile, and log in with your wallet. No other credentials needed. So apparently, according to Trent here, it looks like you need to have an account first to add your address, and then you can remove the email, which is kind of like obviously not the ideal way to do sign-in with Ethereum. But I think they're working on it. They're going to be kind of like changing this. And Brantley mentioned it as well. This isn't the proper way to do sign in with Ethereum, but I think that they're working on it or have fixed it by now, where you can just like simply sign in with Ethereum like the normal way. I don't know if they've fixed it yet. Actually, I'm just looking here. No, but they're saying they're going to be doing that. But still cool to see them kind of like committing to this and actually wanting to implement sign in with Ethereum. You guys know I'm really bullish on this. You guys know that I think this is going to be a really exciting thing if we can make this ubiquitous across the web, not just Web 3 but Web 2 as well. And you know, I mean, it's a big deal, right? Like I think people underestimate how much of a big deal this is. And if you look up the history of Facebook, you'll see that the sign in with Facebook button was actually a massive driver for Facebook, because every time that someone went to a website and they saw this kind of like sign in with Facebook or sign up with Facebook button, and this was like when Facebook was just getting off the ground in like the late 2000s, people would think to themselves, oh, okay, well, what's this Facebook thing, right? And then they could just click a button to sign up with it, and then they all of a sudden have a Facebook account. So with kind of like signing with Ethereum, it is a bit different, but it's the same concept where people will see sign in with Ethereum. They'll be like, oh, okay, what's this Ethereum thing? And they'll go figure out how to create an Ethereum wallet, which is a super easy process, mind you. And then they'll be able to sign in with Ethereum, and they'll get like exposure to the rest of the Ethereum ecosystem. So I think this is going to be an absolutely massive deal once you get sign in with Ethereum integrated across more of this kind of like stuff, more of the Web 2 world especially, but exciting to see Dune have this done here. I'm sure they're going to have like the proper implementation done soon. Now, before I wrap up today's episode, I've got a few minutes left here, so I wanted to just quickly talk about I know I said I wasn't going to talk about the markets, but I just quickly want to talk about the markets again. I know at this point, with ETH being down, like over 50% since its all-time high, a lot of people are thinking, you know, where's the bottom here? Like, where's this going to end? You know, is ETH going back to the, the 1000s? Is it going back to triple digits? Is Anthony just shitposting on Twitter with all his bear posting? That's a yes, by the way. I'm completely shitposting. I have no idea where the bottom is, right? Like, I don't think ETH's gone $80 again, by the way. So I put out a tweet like that. And I'm not being serious, okay, guys? But as I said before, when I was going through the newsletter that Swagtimus is doing, during times like this, to get yourself through it, even if you're underwater on your bags or whatever, if you're underwater and you can't handle the stress from that, and kind of like you need the money, then you have to do what you have to do in that scenario. But if you're in it for the long term, I mean, you kind of like have to tell yourself or ask yourself, like, okay, how long am I going to hold this for? Like, what's it going to look like? Am I still bullish on the Ethereum ecosystem? Am I still bullish on ETH as an asset or the other assets that you're holding? No one can tell you what to do, right? Like, you can listen to all the people in the world telling you how to trade, telling you when to buy and sell, but at the end of the day, no one knows for sure. And, if you have 1 million people giving predictions, obviously, like, some of those people are going to be right just by virtue of the fact that that's a lot of people giving predictions, but they're lucky guesses. No one actually knows where the bottom is, where the top is, how long it's going to take. There's just lucky guesses. So I think that the best thing to do in these kind of like periods, and this is speaking from experience, the absolute best thing you can do is hunker down, learn as much as you can, look for opportunities, because there's always opportunities no matter the market conditions, and make sure that you stick with it, because you'll regret it if you don't, right? If you regret it if you kind of like exit the ecosystem now, go do something else for a couple of years or a year or however long it takes, and come back and the price is like way higher than it is now or something like that. I don't know. Like, this is just kind of like how it plays out usually, though. You'll regret it. I regret, like, when I did it back in 2014, when I kind of like sold my Bitcoin and didn't look at ETH till 2017. And then I kind of like made up for it in 2018 and 2019. So I think that's what you should be doing at the moment. And as I said, don't know where the bottom is, don't know how long this is going to last. It seems like we're completely tied to the macroeconomic environment right now. And as I've explained on previous refuels, no one is an expert on the macro environment. No one can tell what's going to happen there. I definitely have no idea when it comes to the macro environment. I know some things like at a high level, I kind of like get it from a high level, but like I can't do deep analysis on it or anything like that. So kind of like whenever you see people kind of like talking about this on Twitter and saying, oh, the Fed's going to raise rates, they're going to taper, they're going to do this, blah, blah, blah. Like just know that they're just kind of like in the same position as everyone else is, just trying to, go through the motions, trying to see what happens, trying to guess what happens, trying to buy dips and trying to buy the bottom. I mean, and it's rare that you'll buy the exact bottom, but if you kind of like use a strategy like a dollar cost average strategy or anything like that, and you're happy with waiting it out, then that's probably the best way to go about it. But yeah, you have to use a strategy that makes sense for yourself there. But I think on that note, I'm going to end it there for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.